The name of today's sermon is The Time of the End. Not the end of time, but the time of the end. It is the time that we are living. As I sat out in these, listening to our meetings, as many times as I've heard our message, it just blows me away. And sometimes I think we let the world kind of soak in around us, and you forget you are living in the time of the end. And so I brought up some texts that we've used from these sermons, but the focus that I want is not so much that you get a lot of knowledge out of this, that it refreshes what we had and inspire us to do what we should be doing during the time of the end. This is Daniel 12:4. But thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. He's talking about the book of Daniel. Even to the time of the end. Then one of the angels said to the other, standing by the river, how long shall be the fulfillment of all these wonders? Meaning all the prophecies of Daniel's, the seven, the beast in Daniel 7, and all that. And he said, how long will be the fulfillment of all these wonders? And he says, it shall be for a time, a times, and a time and a half, until the power of the holy people shall be completely shattered. Isn't that an amazing statement? Till the power of the holy people shall be completely shattered. And notice it gives the one-time prophecy, probably the most prominent in the Bible. A time, a times, and a half a time. If I told you I had 3.5 dozen eggs, how many eggs would I have? Come on, guys, I hear this. 42, right? If I said I had 30 eggs, or 30 malted milk balls inside each egg, how many malted milk balls would I have? If I had 42 eggs, each with 30 malted milk balls inside, 1,260. If I tell you a time, a times and a half, it is how many years? A time is 1, a time is 2, and a half is half. How many years? How many months? Come on, guys. How many months? 42. How many days? Assuming each month is 30 days. 1,260. Why am I giving you this little math quiz? Because these three terms are interchangeable in the Bible. And when you see that, you automatically have to think of 1,260 years. It is the most dominant period of time. It is the time in which God's people are completely shattered. That should, all right? And Daniel asks, or the one angel asks, how long shall it be? Then he says to Daniel, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. When did he say the time of the end would be? Right after a time, times and a half. Right after the 1,260 years, right? People, if you're Adventists, you got to get this. Because they're going to come after us. And initially, it probably won't be persecution. It'll be the best and the brightest trying to convince you that you've been led astray. All right? The time of the end ends at the 1260 days. We are living. What also happens at the time of the end? Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Go thy way, and the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. But notice at the time of the end, they are unsealed. So Daniel in chapter 7 has this horrifying vision. He says, he sees the lion, he sees the bear, he sees the leopard with 4 wings, but this is the one he's going to say, I want to know more about this. Interesting, he's living in the end of the lion, the beginning of the bear, and he doesn't say, I want to know about the bear. He says, I want to know about this 4th beast. After this I saw in night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible exceedingly. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring, breaking into pieces, and tramping the residue with its feet. And it was different from all the other beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. And then it'll go on to say, upon whom 3 fell. And I was considering the horns, and there was one another horn, and a little one coming up among them. You see that one in the middle there? And there in this horn were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous or blasphemous words. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and he shall wear out the saints of the Most High. You read this same in Revelation. It says he would make war against God's saints and prevail. Right? Daniel is sick to his stomach when he reads this. The time of the end does not come until the 1260s, until the holy people of God is shattered. This is the power that does it. And he shall speak great words against the Most High. How about claiming the authority to forgive sins? This is from the dignity and the duties of a priest. And they grab this from the text says, whatever you forgive on earth will be given for in heaven. We know this text. If you steal from me, and you come to me and you ask me for forgiveness, and I forgive you, God will forgive you. But if you sin against God, I cannot get in the middle of that, right? Speaking of the priest who sits and hears all the sins and then says, I forgive you, go do 20 Hail Marys or whatever it is. It says, God himself is obliged to abide by the judgment of his priest, either not to pardon or to pardon. According as the priest refuses or gives absolution, the sentence of the priest precedes, and God subscribes to it. Is that pompous words? Right? Many of us were brought up as Protestants, and when I can't understand how somebody could believe this, but I had a dear Catholic wife, and she was taught that growing up. The sentence precedes, and God prescribes to it. This power would also think to change times and laws. This is the Council of Laodicea. Notice the year. 325 AD. We talked about this a while back when we were talking about how this nation became a constitutional republic, and how that the early church made the same mistake that the Jews did when they wanted a king. The church was in a battle as to different doctrines. One of them was the doctrine of, was Christ in pre-existence in heaven? Michael. Or was he simply born to Mary and then now he has a preeminent place in the church? It's called the Arian heir. And so the church, rather than settling itself, they prescribed to the Roman Emperor Constantine. Now Constantine is having a war against the Huns, and they have come all the way through Turkey up and through the Baltics, and they're halfway across Europe when Constantine leads a group of Roman legions. They're defeated on 2 battles, and he one night has a vision of a cross. Not the cross you and I think of, it's the one with the loop. And he said, this must be the Christian God, and he's going to bless me. So he has all the soldiers put the cross on their shield, and he marches them through the river and baptizes them. And the next day he defeats the Huns. And he says, this Christian God's a handy guy to have on your side, right? So he says to the head of the Christian church, I will not persecute you anymore, but there's one thing I want you to do for me. All of my kingdoms keep one day holy in honor of the sun God. And we would like you to move your day of worship from Saturday to Sunday. And hence we have the Council of Laodicea. Christians shall not Judaize or be idle on Saturday, but the Lord's day shall be especially honored. And as being Christian, shall, if possible, do no work on that day. If, however, they are found Judaizing, keeping the Sabbath, they shall be shut out from the church. They would think to change the law of God. St. Catherine Catholic Church right here in Holly. Perhaps the boldest thing, the most revolutionary change the church ever did happened in the 1st century. The holy day, the Sabbath, was changed from Saturday to Sunday, not from any directions noted in the scriptures, but from the church's sense of its own power. People who think the scriptures should be think the scriptures should be the sole authority should logically become Seventh-day Adventists and keep Saturday holy. I'll say one thing for the Catholics. They don't beat around the bush. Oh no, we changed God's law. We can do that. Catholic Record, September 1st, 1923. Sunday is our mark of authority. The church is above the Bible, and this transfer of Sabbath observance is proof of that fact. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, or those kind of pompous. And he shall wear out the saints of them. This is the thing that really had Daniel upset, that last part. And he shall wear out the saints. Did the church and state unite under Rome to persecute those who did not go along with their teachings? Absolutely they did. Even by their own numbers, it's 50 million, although today they say, well, we might have misjudged that. There were 29 crusades. Did you know that? Do you know how many were against the Muslims? 3. Guess who the other 26 were against? Heretics. Right? The Waldenses. They warred against the Huguenots and any other Protestant that they considered to be heretics. Following this vision, this is Daniel's thought. He says, my thoughts greatly troubled me. My countenance was changed, but I kept the matter to myself. This was very upsetting. Following Daniel 7 with the beast, he then has Daniel 8. Daniel 8 speaks of a goat that goes and destroys the ram, and a little horn comes up, and out of this comes a little horn power, and this little horn power would cast truth to the ground. And he did this, and it prospered. And this is Daniel's reaction. I fainted and was sick for days. I was astonished by the vision. What's he astonished by? Beasts? Goats? What's he astonished by? That the power of God's people would be shattered by this. Protestant estimates are 120 million Protestants died. For, among other things, believing in the Bible. This is from a professor of history at the University of Rome. To the succession of Caesar came the succession of the Roman pontiffs. When Constantine left Rome, he gave his seat to the pontiff. Now, around 326, when the Council of Laodicea comes out, a number of things happen in Rome. There is just one dramatic invasion after another. And I think 4 different times, Rome is completely sacked by these dramatic tribes. And it's so bad that Constantine says, I can't rule from Rome. So he moves his capital to Constantine. And there you will have, it's in what present-day Greece. You will have the Greek Orthodox Church. He will become the head of the church. But in the West, he leaves the Bishop of Rome. Notice he's not called a pope. The Bishop of Rome, you now have authority. Well, the problem with the Bishop of Rome is these dramatic tribes are coming down, and one after another. And so there is this one dramatic tribe called the Franks. There's a king named Clovis. And he's battling for dominance against the other Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Heruli. And he goes, and on a war of conquest, he conquers what is present-day France, a good part of Spain, and gets into Germany and even up into the Scandinavian. And he marries a girl who is a quote-unquote Christian. And the Pope comes to him and says, if you will convert to Christianity, I will recognize you as the Holy Roman Emperor in all things civil matters. But you will recognize me in all things regarding religious matters. Clovis agrees to be baptized, and he is your first Holy Roman Emperor. It is a union of church and state. State and church are precious gifts of God, but the state being desecrated becomes beast-like, and the church apostatizing becomes a harlot. Clovis is crowned the first Holy Roman Empire in AD 538. I read a book called Romanism and the Reformation, and it was by an Anglican priest from England, written in 1890. I thought I was reading The Great Controversy. I thought he drilled it. He gets his date off. I think he comes up with 424 as beginning, but the point is the same. Beginning after the fall of Rome, because that's when this power rises, there comes a power that would be different from the others, right? And it would root out 3 of those of the horns, and that's what Clovis does. He destroys 3 of them, and that is in 538. Now remember, I asked you the 1260 years. Sometimes that's referred to as 42 months. Sometimes it's referred to as a times and a. It's the 1260 days. We know in Bible prophecy, 1 day equals 1 literal year, right? And there's the math I quizzed you guys on, 42 months, 30 days, 1260, right? If you add 1260 years to 538, you come down to 1798. 1798, Napoleon is going across Europe, and he comes into Rome, and he takes the Rome prisoner. But here's the thing I want you guys to get. That's not the actual wound, all right? That might be the culmination. That's the icing on the cake, but that's not the... You see, there's two wounds that happen. One is a spiritual wound, and the other is a physical wound. This is the physical wound. Up till then, the Pope has been in church-state unions with the King of France, the King of Spain, the King of Portugal, the King of Belgium, the King of the Holy Roman Emperor, my relatives, the Austro-Hungarian. And whenever he wants to put down heresy, he sends a letter to that king, and that king dutifully wipes out that Protestant nation, right? But something happens. France overthrows their king. They make Napoleon their emperor, and Napoleon despises the Catholic Church. And he wipes out every Catholic monarchy in Rome. So now who's Pope going to call? Right? King of Spain is dead. King of France is dead. Holy Roman Emperor is pretty well muted. They're defeated by him. That's the physical wounding. It says here the Pope was taken and he died in captivity. Well, there was another Pope and another Pope and another Pope and another Pope. That's not what the deadly wound. The deadly wound is you literally tore apart church and state, right? But notice at the end of time what's going to happen. It comes back together. But there's a second wound, and it's probably the thing that happened. During the Reformation, there were two things that all Protestants agreed on. Number one, that the Bible was the sole source of doctrine. Do anyone want to guess what the second one is? That the papacy was the Antichrist power as the little horn of Daniel. He's also the man of sin of 2 Thessalonians, right? Every Protestant believed that. Martin Luther wrote about it. The first sermon that John Knox, who was the head of the Presbyterian Church, ever gave was to the Queen of England, and he spoke to her about how the papacy was the Antichrist. And by the way, I want to make one point. This word Antichrist, if I say that word, what do you think? Something that is the opposite of Christ? So if you go Left Behind, Nicholas Carpathia, there are these evil beings. When I was growing up, there was a guy named Damien, he had 666. They're not Antichrist. They're another Christ, one who would take the place of Christ, right? That's really what that message means. If you are living in the dark ages, there's only one church. That's what that word Catholic means, universal church. And who's the head of that? The Pope. And if he says you don't go to heaven and you burn forever in purgatory, guess what? You don't go to heaven, you burn forever. So what is going to give them the courage? Because the church has put the few remaining Bibles in what language if you're in the West? Latin. Can the average person read it? Even among the royalty. And of those who can, there are very few copies of it around. Martin Luther says he was scouring around in the library of his monkery, whatever you call those, were they all? Monastery, thank you. He was scouring around in the library and he comes across this old leather-bound book and he goes, "What is this?" Starts reading it. He reads, "The just shall live by faith," Galatians. And he says, "I realized this was a Bible," right? There is huge ignorance. God said, unless those days were shortened, there'd be no Christians left. So not only is Martin Luther, but at the same time, Wycliffe starts in England, they begin to read and put up their Protestants. They do, something happens, there's an invention that comes out. It's called the printing press. And Luther translates the Bible into the German people's language. Wycliffe changes it into the English and others. And out goes all these copies of the Bible. And it doesn't take you long reading the Bible and you say, "Hey, wait a minute. You're not the head of the church. You are the Antichrist power. And that's the spiritual wounding of the papacy. There's two of them. The physical, Napoleon destroys all the Catholic kings, right? But on the spiritual side, every Protestant, you go right down the list, Methodist, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Congregationalists, on, every single one of them believe that the Pope was none other than the Antichrist power spoken of in Daniel 7. What time do we're living in? So if you're going to heal the wound, what do you got to heal? What gave power to it? You've got to heal that the papacy is no longer the Antichrist. You've got to take the little horn power of Daniel 7, snap it off that beast's head, put it all the way down in the future. Oh, we don't know who that is. Some guy pops up, Nicholas Carpathian, Europe, way at the end of time. Oh, and there's another little horn in Daniel 8, and you snap that off. You say, oh, no, that happened way in the past. There's this guy named Nicholas Carpathian, or Antiochus Epiphanes. He was one of the Seleucid kings, all right? Oh, well, hey, guess what? I guess there wasn't this Catholic Antichrist power. And guys like our power, what was this guy's name? Schuller says, I need to apologize to the Pope. I'm telling you, if I'd have been there, I'm not a violent man, I'd have slapped him right out of his shoes. For what do you want to apologize? 50 million to 120 million killed, burned at the stake? Do you know the majority of the most horrible torture instruments ever conceived were conceived during the Inquisition, and they were used against Protestants to get them to convert, to change their opinions? Okay, I diverged. The point being, if you really understand who the papacy is, and that's why I'm going over these, you can't get back into bed with them. But today, drive around, most of them don't even have their denomination name. They're River of Life, Community, Bible Church, all that. I'm not saying they're all bad, but go ask them, what do you believe about prophecy? And if they have any clue, it's probably something to do with the Left Behind series, in which the little horn's way down at the end of time. Has the spiritual wound begun to heal? Now, I'm asking you about us. In the book, A Trip to the Supernatural, Roger Monod, this good little French Catholic boy, and he's sitting in this satanic congregation. And all these Satanists are sitting there, and this satanic priests, and they're bragging, and they're singing, they're pulling out hymnals, Protestant hymnals, but they're singing them to Satan. And Roger can't quite bring himself to do that. And he says, I'm angry at God. He was brought up Catholic, and I just think God's mean, but I can't do this. And the guy says, you're having a problem with this, aren't you? And he says, yeah. He says, but we'll get you used to it. He says, but if it makes you feel better, you can go to a church. In fact, you can go to any church, but you can't go to a church that keeps the Creator's Day. And the guy turns around and says, yeah, we got them. We got them all. We got them all. And then one guy says, well, what about the Seventh-day Adventist? You don't have them. And the priest says, well, I'm going to say something whether you like it or not. He said, because they keep the Creator's Day, we're not able to deceive them like we are the other ones. But they're so small in number, we don't worry about them. Who do you think the bullseye is going to be on when this thing starts to ramp up? Now, the good news is God's going to be backing us up. He'll take care of us. We got this. But anything that deals with free will, Satan's going to be able to come after you. And you've got to know your doctrine, folks. You've got to know who the papacy was. And you've got to understand, Ellen White says that fallen Protestant will join with them. In fact, in this nation, it's fallen Protestantism that comes after. It's not so much the Catholics in this nation. And they're going to come to you, and there's going to be things that you agree with, but they're going to understand. This is in 2 Thessalonians 2. This is another thing that all of them believe. Says, my brethren, I ask that you not be soon shaken in mind or be troubled, neither by spirit or by word or by the letter, as if the day of Christ is at hand. Now, this is Paul writing. Jesus has gone to heaven, and people are starting to say, we want Jesus to come back. Is he going to return? Is he going to come back anytime soon? Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day, the second coming of Christ, shall not come unless there come a falling away first, and that the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God, or that is worship, so that he sits in the temple of God, showing himself to be God. The early Christians, around 400, began to pray that this power would not be in their day. The last part, sits in the temple of God, showing himself to be God. Leo, encyclical letters of Leo the 13th, we hold upon this earth the place of Almighty God. Who would say that? Who would say such a thing? And yet, I remember Gina, your dear little sister. She had divorced a very horrible husband, and the church had excommunicated her for getting communion. So on her bookcase was a little picture of Pope John Paul. And she says, that's John Paul. He's God. You know that, don't you? There are people out there whom God will reach. His Spirit will touch. And they need to be sitting right in these pews. Next fall, we got to have people sitting in these pews who are going to hear this. Because there's people who believe this. There's people who think that the Antichrist, and they're giving their money to the Jews because they believe 144,000 Jews are going to come up after they're raptured to heaven, and they're going to evangelize the world. So they're taking money out of their pocket and they're giving to this fund for these 144,000. It's a complete fantasy. I just need them to be sitting right there. Sitting right there when we have this meeting. I sat there and listened to this, and where are the people that need to hear this? Who is this beast power? I think we know. It's not, I'm not talking about Father O'Brien or Sister Mary. I'm talking about the system that grows up. In Revelation 13, which is almost a carbon copy of Daniel. Now, Daniel is sick with what he reads, all right? Daniel 13 gives you the same imagery of Daniel 7 on it. And I saw, as it were, one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded. That's what we just talked about. 2 wounds, right? One is spiritual, one is physical. The spiritual is prophecy told them that Daniel 7 particularly was talking that is the papacy. The physical, the ripping apart of the church and the state, happened when Napoleon wipes out all the Catholic kings, right? Now listen, and his deadly wound was healed, and all of the world marveled and followed the beast. Has the spiritual wound been healed? To a large extent, it has. It's just that there's this one thorny group of Seventh-day Adventists that just won't let this go, right? And we won't let it go until the very end of time. But the physical wound, not yet, is being healed. When the physical wound comes, this power will be the new Catholic king power. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. And he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke as a dragon. You know, during the meetings, that is the United States. And the United States will cause the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the the first beast, the papacy, whose deadly wound was healed. I talked to you some about, there's a movie, Godfather, and the head of the Godfather he's getting close to death, and he's going to turn over the family to his younger son named Michael. And so he's sitting out in the garden playing with his grandchildren, and he's counseling Michael on the things that are going to happen. He says, okay, I want to tell you this one more time. He says, as soon as I die, they're going to come after you. And he says, the way they're going to do it is one of your loyal guys is going to come and he's going to say he's going to set up security in his territory. And when you go to that territory, they'll kill you. He says, so the one that comes to you, that's the traitor. Michael goes, okay, got it. He calls him Papa. A few scenes later, the Godfathers died, and they're all sitting around the casket of the Godfather, and all these mafia families are coming by, and the heads of them all come with a rose, and they drop it on his casket, and then they look at Michael, who's the new heir apparent, and they nod to him. And this one guy who they knew was the real ringleader, he walks off. And then one of his loyal lieutenants walks up and says, hey, so-and-so wants to have a meeting. And he says, I'll set it up. It'll be in my territory. I'll arrange security. And Michael goes, okay. And he walks away. And the brothers all look at each other and go, oh, we thought it would be this other guy. We never thought it'd be him. He goes, no, it's him. Ellen White says that the day's going to come when they remove our constitutional republic. It says they will tear down every part of it. And it's fallen Protestantism. And this will be, if you hear the cry, many of the Christian right, they talk about they want religious freedom. And what they mean by religious freedom is tear down the wall separating church and state. When that happens, the Sunday law will quickly follow behind it. The law says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And it was Thomas Jefferson went on to say there shall be a wall that separates. He was being asked by the Baptist church to do something. And he said there's a wall between church and state. And they got that from the Old Testament where God separated the civil and the religious powers. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, except this funny little group that meets on Saturdays that has this excellent health message and understands who the papacy is. For they shall keep the commandments of God and have the prophecy of Jesus. This occurs at the time of the end. The spiritual wound is almost healed. The physical wound is only a little bit off. And when it hits, we will not be able to have the meetings that we just have. We are in the time of the end. Let us make use of it. Eh? Thank you.